Okay. Okay, we have a presentation about non-actual motion, and we will start with Bloomberg's book, which is called Alice. We were interested what motion actually is. And in Bloomberg's text, in the first part, we can find that it is a well-known term until we have to describe it. Of course, we have also other definitions, if we can say like that. But the most important for us is that it is a multi-phased phenomenon in both language and experience. Mafia claim is that language is structured the way it is because of our natural ability to simulate motion. There are many types of motion in languages. There are only few because we were interested in those 6 types of motion. It is inner motion, another term for movement, and it describes the activity involved in movement. Displacement, it is about changing locations in space, and it is called outer motion. There can be live motion and observe, it is about the perspective of a person, and the most important for us, actual and non-actual motion. There is also a division between languages. There are as-framed, it means satellite-framed languages, and verb-framed languages. The most important difference is between the path and the manner. Vowel-framed are concerned about the path, while the S-frame is concerned about the manner. Of course, there are also other distinctions between those languages, and here we can see an example. There was a problem about a Thai because Thai language is concerned in those aspects. This text might look similar than previous, but it is different. There are many definitions, many terms used to describe non-actual motion. Time use virtual motion, fictive, there is also abstract motion, subjective motion, and so on. We will use NAM as Bloomberg proposed. Those terms have different scopes, but thanks to Bloomberg, we can use it as a synonym. Bloomberg says it, so we are happy about it. We can see this here, NAM definitions. The most important for us is that one. A sentence that by substituting the expression of the spatial extended object with one that denotes an entity that can move by its own volition, actual motion would be the only possible interpretation. Otherwise, NAM is used to describe motion that is not actual here. For example, if we have Fred is walking or swimming through something, we can exchange Fred for example a road. A road swims across the city or whatever. There are 3 motivations of NAM: the capacity for self-motion, visual scanning, it is about the way we perceive the world, and the imagination of movement. Here are methods used by Bloomberg in these studies. And those are examples of pictures. One of the experiment. There was 16 speakers of Swedish, 14 of Thai, and 13 of French. They were shown 38 pictures. 24 was target pictures, 12 were controls and 2 was for practice before the studies. They were asked in their natural language to look at each picture and describe what they see in one sentence, just only one sentence. It is important because if you will see our study, you will see one difference about it.
Okay, so we have here 11 different verbs that were used by Swedish participants. And besides this organization, verbs like ga and leda are also generic verbs. And a wooden fence that runs into a straight line, it's an example that suggests that information about the manner of motion in noun sentences is demoted. And the motion is crucial for a motion verb in order to be regarded as bleached. Earlier, this example, a pipe out through a tunnel, it's an example of complex noun phrase, and it falls outside of noun sentences. There is no verb, but there's an adverb, ut. Okay, so all pictures elicit noun sentences in Swedish with generic or bleached verbs, and everything was about how the figure, as spatially extended object, was related to the spatial environment. And this was conveyed in two ways. Use of change of state verbs, notice to motion and path, plus direction, prepositions, and all adverbs. And these were noun sentences that falls under these terms. And use of complex noun phrases only with prepositions and adverbs expressing path and or direction, and sentences that falls under this term are called NAP, which is non-actual path. Here we have 36 different verbs used by French participants, and like in Swedish description, there was a tendency to use bleached and generic verbs. However, the range 36 was wider, and a small path that leads to the door. It's an example of a generic motion verb, road that passes under the tunnel. It's a common expression of motion in French. And here we are living a tunnel. It's an example that participants described the picture when the figure was partially inside and outside the landmark. So speakers use verbs like sortir here, which means exit and enter in some cases. Okay, next example, a road that heads toward forest. So it's an example of direction verb in the sentence, and this pipe that seems to penetrate under those rocks. It's a very interesting example because it's a combination of manner and path, and the word penetrate is here the key. Okay, so due to function, differentiation between actual and non-actual motion can be blurred, and there is ambiguity in the motivation of noun sentences, either the function of transporting water or the spatial configuration of the pipe. Considering multifaceted nature of noun sentences, we can expect both. Here we have noun in Thai, 22 different verbs, and we have to mention that Thai is equivalently framed language with a characteristic construction which is SVC, so serial verb construction. And Thai noun sentences didn't contain verbs like Swedish leda or French manner, which is both lead And this example, there is lead like fa. Yes, this example shows that verb fa can express actual motion, but it can't express emotion in noun sentences.
The Thai speakers use our three types of modern verbs where use is expressing noun. Background direction verbs independent or together as well manner verbs. The religion changing verbs have and of, whereas in context where the figure did not enter or exit a number. This suggests the verbs are reached even in the context of noun sentences. This verb by is dependent on the conceptualizations by motivated by experience of noun and dependent on language conventions. Thai speakers use vowels limited to entity stimulus of first-person perspective, extension spatial, located partly outside and partly inside the unity of reference. Another tendency was only be the Thai speakers was manner verbs in noun sentences depend of wherever the figure was associated with fast or slow travel. The Thai speakers mark this difference with manner verbs expressing different velocities of common translation.
Summarizing what is says Bloomberg, this supports arguments for the universality and strong cognitive basis on this linguistic phenomenon. Non-sentences were in our three languages most common for stimuli of according motion and titles represented from a first-person perspective. This result was interpreted and most strongly in favor of the motivation from self-motion, but support was also found for the rule of imagination and scanning. In some, noun expressions are not only motivated from experience, but also highly conventionalized, with clear language-specific constraints on their formation. Another base text for our work is an article Tenny Marklock. She says that structural descriptions of static sense, such as the mountain range goes from Mexico to Canada, whether, for example, often used in Poland, the phrase "the road leads through the woods," and in doing so invokes a subjective sense of emotion on state change. Scientists use different definitions for the structure, depending on what is understood by Langacker and Talmy in particular argued that these constructions involved an implicit, fleeting sense of motion, even though no motion was explicitly expressed. Langacker called it abstract motion. Talmy referred to it as fictive motion. Matsumoto called this fleeting sense of motion subjective motion to exemplify its subjective nature.
Okay, so next experiment was Matok and Ramskar and Srinivasan done research on how direction of numbers affect temporal reasoning. And after participants filled in the blanks from 5 to 17 and from 17 to 5, they had to answer this move forward time question. And participants that earlier filled in the blanks from 5 to 17 answered that it's a Friday, while those who filled in the blanks from 17 to 5 respond that it's Monday. And this clearly shows that simple thinking about direction of objects was enough for taking an ego-moving perspective.
People were shown a few spatial scenes on a computer screen while they passively listened to sentences that had non-actual motion, abstract motion, or it had. Results show that people spent more time viewing the regions of the scene that contained relevant trajectories while they were processing sentences with abstract motion. Listening to there was also a research about if clutter of an environment will change something in this results, and they look longer at the trajectories when they listen to the information about the cluttered terrain. These results suggest that abstract motion in language is capable of causing mental simulation of physical movement along the trajectories. Another experiment was like this. People read sentences. I can see thread across a table, across the room, and across the field. It was divided between visual path, long, short, medium, and so on. And they were asked to answer the question about a meeting that was moved forward. And those are the results. Quite big amount of participants, and the results show that visual paths influence the conceptualization of time because of increasing Friday responses, about 13%. There was also experiment about the imperfective and perfective aspect. We haven't got this on the slide because it is an older version, so I'm sorry that you cannot look for that. But if it is going about perfective and imperfective aspect, imperfective aspects influence the noun sentences. It is about 13%, like in a previous test. Imperfective, they were asked a question in imperfective. Bob was planting pine trees along his driveway last week, and perfective, Bob planted pine trees along his driveway last week. The answers, how long was the path, was divided into 3 groups, like here, short, medium, and long. And in imperfective sentence, the short visual path was about 20%, and the long was 39%, while in perfective it was 33 to 34%.
So our additional text was activation in human and TMST, area by static images with implied motion. And medial superior temporal cortex, MTMST, is one of the main brain regions engaged in the perceptual analysis of visual motion. And the researchers carried out 2 experiments to check if these parts of brain are also involved in processing of static images implied motion. Okay. In first experiment, researchers used fMRI to localize each of the subjects' MT-MST in the lateral occipital region, while participants observed moving rings. It's here. And next, they measured activity in this area while subjects observed photographs, and response was expressed in PSC, which is percent signal change. And in A, we can see activity of MT-MST area while participants were doing things, and B, while participants were doing images with impact motion, like I said, and the green circle indicates regions activated significantly for both moving rings and images with implied motion. Okay, these are the examples of pictures that were shown to participants. First, the picture is picture with implied motion, and the rest is there's no implied motion, but there's different kind of it, and the numbers below are the average PSC for each photograph, and we can clearly see that PSC in MT-MST was significantly greater for images of athletes with implied motion than for athlete without motion, men at rest, or
in a second experiment, researchers test the response of area MT-MST to photographs of animals and natural views that either depicted implied motion or did not. Just as suspect when the participant viewed images with animals implied motion, the activation of MT-MST area was greater than in other cases. Conclusions: stronger functional magnetic resonance imaging activation with MT-MST during observation of photographs with implied motion compared to observation photographs without implied motion. Brain regions involved in visual analysis of motion are also engaged in processing implied dynamic information from images.
We don't want to only rewrite texts of Bloomberg and Marlock, and only based on their experiments, so we did our experiment. Non-sentences in Polish, our study. And we agreed that also in Polish people are using non-sentences, but we were curious when people will use the sentence to describe a picture. What in our opinion affects use of non-sentences? It's details presented, length of expression, presence of actual motion, and perspective. Using Google Form, we create 4 forms with 4 pictures in each other. We asked people just one question. It was in simple, natural for you language, describe the picture. We divided pictures into first-person perspective, few details, first-person perspective with more details, and third-person perspective, and actual motion. Participants filled just only 1 from 4 seats. There was no criteria like sex, age, or field of study. We used the same definition of name as used by Bloomberg, and we looked for any use of name in answer. We excluded one-word answers, no relations between answer and the picture, and answers that could be name of the picture rather than description. After all, we received 58 answers. Is there any motion? Here you can see how many people did first form. Oh, not this. Sorry. How many people did forms? First, second, third, fourth, sum of them, and average. Here you can see use of name.
in 4 pictures. In first form, second form, third form, and the same. The role of perspective. Here you can see how many pictures from first person perspective with no much details people use them. It's 26% of all answers. Here it's interesting. First person with actual motion. So in these pictures there was a car or a human with, and they are doing some motion in this picture, right? And it's interesting because only 33% answers was like car is going through the road. But 4 people, 4 times, it was answer like car is going through the road, but road is going somewhere, or something like this. First person with many details, and third person not very popular. It's never. Here you can see example of our pictures. Differences between our and Bloomberg's research. Our examination wasn't methodologically correct, but and relations we found couldn't be recognized as science facts, but we have some conclusions. Bloomberg made his participants describe picture in 1 sentence. We didn't restrict ours this way, exception form 4. Surprisingly, in this one, motion centers were most popular. Pictures chosen by us were mostly in color, whereas Bloomberg's were black and white. It worked that our participants more often focused on the feelings about picture and mood on it, in it. The role of details. We thought the details would disturb people of using them. Surprisingly, pictures which we categorized as pictures with more details had more use of them than with lack of them. Usually more detailed pictures were photos. Probably they are more dynamic than drawings, so they naturally forced use of them. Human factor. Amount of NEM sentences depend also on people who take part in experiments. A few people used them in all pictures, whereas another didn't use it once. It didn't depend on length, but people who used richer language in description used them more often. And this is it. Thank you for attention. And you've got bibliography and our photo from the project.
Thank you. Questions?
Trochę nam się przedłużyło, ale...
Przedłużyło się, ale się nie wydłużyło.
Ale